they're going to pay very good
tribute to her on the parade.
during
Yeah.
the parade.
Mm-hmm.
So, your thoughts on those two people? You grew up with the Brady Bunch, didn't you?
Yeah, right. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
TV land, I guess.
Okay, there you go.
Florence, it makes some sense, right? I mean, on the surface, her connection, she's Hoosier, and anyway, somehow got connected with the Holman family, the Holman George family, and was a friend to the family, and that was one of the reasons she was out there for so long. But then you kind of have to start wondering about Jim Nabors. Why is a man not from Indiana with no connection, hardly at all, coming back to sing back home again in Indiana? But he's as much a part of the race and as much a Hoosier as any of us, I think, after his contributions over the years.
You know the story. The story was that Tony Holman heard him sing and said, "Can you do the song?" And he goes, "Well, sure, I can do the song."
Like on Gomer Pyle?
Well, he thought the song was going to be the national anthem.
Right.
And the Purdue marching conductor said, "No, you're singing Back Home Again, Indiana." He goes, "Well, I need the words." And they literally wrote the words on the palm of his hands, and it made history, and he was there ever since, and now we have a new tradition, and it's just a neat thing. I know we're all growing old. Brian, you're the young buck. You'll still be doing Indiana SRN while we're probably in heaven looking down at you. But the traditions here, Steve, you and I have grown up of knowing the traditions of the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, and now the young people. My granddaughter at 5 years old knows about the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. She doesn't live, and she lives in Maryland, but her daddy will watch the race with her, and she watched the race at age 4.
And Keith,
it's just one of the traditions that
we've continued to mention the fact of the ambassadors of the Indy 500. This is another guy who not only was here during race week or race month to be a part of this great festival, but it was a whole year. And so when the first time that he came here was such a success, and then he became part of the festival parade. So when you saw Jim Nabors coming down the road in one of those pace cars, the crowd's was just as much as the drivers.
I think that's often been the case. Driver introductions in recent years, you get a big cheer for Tony Kanaan or for Elio or for Marco Andretti, what have you. But I don't think anybody got a cheer like Jim the last couple of years he was coming. And you were talking about the age difference. And I think the traditions are something that you learn to really love and appreciate as you age. I remember my dad talking reverently about, this is Gomer Pyle singing Back Home Again in Indiana, and I'm sitting there in the stands thinking,
who is Gomer Pyle?
This seems a little hokey. But then all of a sudden, and I don't quite know when the switch flipped, but at a certain point, I live as much for the pre-race as I do for the race itself, and certainly the last year for Jim, I teared up quite a bit. I ended up with sunscreen in my eyes. It was kind of a miserable hour. But,
and I think the conversation immediately started as soon as he finished that.
Who is next?
Yeah.
Who can do it next?
Well, they asked me, but I was tied up all that. No, I'm just.
Yeah, a lot of tears were shed over that. So, but we enjoyed him for as long as we had him.
The other story about Jim Nabors, he said, people are so used to seeing him as Gomer Pyle, and as goofy as Gomer Pyle was, he goes, but if it wasn't for my sponsor of General Mills, I wouldn't have made the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, because they put me. The show was making a run, and he got to go to the Indianapolis Motor Speedway for one of the things for General Mills. And he says, and if that's the case, I would have never met this guy named Tony Holman.
And even when he was here, Ryan, in many of the interviews, some of the interviewers would ask him, please say, golly! So he responded very nicely.
We got 30